Next up, we have Jim Keravala. Can you hear us, Jim?
Hello, good
Hello,
afternoon.
Jim from Off-World, and great to see you there. A wonderful, I think it's a rock collection behind you amidst the books, I'm not quite sure. Great to see you, and I believe your talk is between a rock and a hard celestial body.
That's right. Good.
Great. We look forward to hearing from you. Over to you, Jim.
Thank you. Well, so this presentation will be a little bit of a lessons learned and hopefully of value for up and coming space entrepreneurs, especially beyond the geostationary.
I don't have a card, but find me on LinkedIn.
Do you have? Okay, so do you have my presentation up? Good. And so the first set of principles, I think, are absolutely key to understand for a new space business is that we're not just in this for business anymore. The existential challenges that our species is facing are critical for us in the space community to get our act together and start building the infrastructure and systems in cislunar space to support the needs of Earth, the environment, life for humanity, to protect us against existential risk, and to open up the frontier. So these are very critical challenges that we face, and it's not clear that we have a generation or two of economic opportunity to make this happen. So we better get on with it now. So the second principle I'd like to share is that a vision model is not a business model. And you know, this is a premise that I tested myself for many years in my previous venture. And you need to be clear about what it is you want to do for the long term. Make that vision the grandest vision you can commit to for your life, and make that happen. But in order to execute on it, you really need to operate within business principles. There's no getting around it. There is no magic philanthropic bullet or altruistic bullet that anyone beyond the very early majority will buy into. Everyone into the early majority and the late majority, they all operate on financial, business, and economic principles, and that's where we must connect to in order to scale the business that we want in cislunar space and beyond. So then it's therefore key to understand, well, what are the differences between your vision and your business model in your new startup that you're undertaking, and also understand what market you are trying to apply that to. So if you start off with a vision, sometimes, and this is what I had done in my previous venture, I assumed my vision model was identical to my business model, and actually created an entire architecture, systems engineering, and econometric economic model that was built around that premise. The challenge is the assumptions that underwrite that premise are effectively flawed if you're in anything other than existing markets. So in mature existing markets, you can kind of take that assumption. Automotive industry, aviation, the exciting world of accounting software or office furniture, the oil industry, mining, terrestrial mining, etc. You plan your outlook and you operate your business accordingly. And for the most part, the synergy is extremely high, and the overlap is very high. As we move into then going the other direction into less established markets, much more emerging markets. So there's some business there, there's still growth, it's a growth curve. Then you've got to be a bit nimble. And this can be for, say, reusable launch, new LEO constellations, Earth observation business models, with analytics, etc. Microgravity manufacturing may be a very early one. Uh, well, we can have a good idea of where we want to go with that business. And there are emerging customers, supply chains, and the ability to hit end users across the value proposition that kind of allow us to say, well, look, this is what I want to do, and this is more or less what I'm going to do now. As Just was alluding to earlier as well, you've got to be nimble where to apply your, say, your terrestrial or your business model, conventional model aspect, and then what you want to do afterwards, and find out where that interface is, what parts of your current developments are directly applicable, what know-how is transferable, and where you have to reinvest new non-recurring engineering to make that happen. So that's for kind of early emerging markets. And arguably the space resources sector is stuck between a rock and a hard celestial body. I mean, this is really where we're at for the purposes of all our friends at this event. Beyond geostationary Earth orbit, there is a huge market chasm. And some people may disagree. Some people may say, well, our launch company has made a proposition to buy X hundred tons of water in a statement. NASA wants to buy some regolith for a few kilograms of regolith. That's not a market. What we have are some interesting, let's say, catalysts, but we don't have a scaling market yet. We can't point to customers who are willing to put capital down. We don't have transaction and validation mechanisms. The supply chains aren't there. Many other elements of the infrastructure do not yet exist. So there is a little bit of a chicken and egg problem with this, of course. And these are such fields as lunar ice extraction, processing of regolith materials, fabrication on the moon, and then things like asteroid surfing or asteroid mining. Both are equally useful right now and equally realistic. That's the other challenge as a space entrepreneur, especially going out into the areas and markets where the prospective markets that aren't yet anywhere near useful. Our ability as space entrepreneurs to engage in reality dysfunction is pretty strong. So you need to learn how to be quite self-critical, self-aware as well of your assumptions, and most importantly, build a team. I would say the most important thing is build a team that complements the gaps that you have personally. The reason you're starting a space resource business is because you're a little bit nuts, and big salutes to you. Don't ever stop doing that, but make sure you build a team that complements so that you can all bring the best of yourselves to that quest. Go where there are customers. Don't try and wing it. Go where there are customers and understand the difference between the customers and a prospective market. A customer is someone you can grab around the collar and put a contract in front of them. So with that contract, you fix a starting point this side of that market gap. And that's extremely important because the amount of effort, capability, know-how, and organization it takes to build product, any product, is a significant verification and validation of your capability to run an expanding business in the even more challenging areas of very, very early markets. The logical implication of that is to choose terrestrial based land services, standard businesses or orbital services to start off with, and build out from there. and be very clear about what your 30-year arc is, at least, what your 30-year arc is for yourself, so that you can plan all of the stages that you want to get to and work your way back. And that gives you an internal compass, if you like, of where you should be going as a baseline. And trust me, in 6 months it will change, but at least you know from where it's changed. And then in order to cross that chasm, you need to build your own resources. You need to build the resources either with equity, debt, or contract-based financing. And the greatest validation is to get customers, is to generate revenue and to demonstrate that you're building products that meet a need. Again, if as a young space entrepreneur wanting to test your own premise, if you want to challenge that, go ahead and do it. Go ahead and challenge the premise, and you may get lucky. You may get lucky. But there's an old saying, hope is not a strategy. So if you want to go with the highest probability success, follow the 18 to 36 months heuristic. And as Michael explained a bit earlier in his talk about investment, think like an investor and think like a customer. You're thinking like an investor with that principle. That's where 36 months is an ideal spot to demonstrate initial ROI on an investor's commitment to you. Don't try and target market sectors, engage actual customers. That will define your market sectors. Optimize for cost to service, not mass to orbit. The last 60 to 70 years, we've been worried about expendable launch vehicles and inelastic launch pricing and shaving every gram and kilogram off our payload mass in order to optimize the launch equation. I believe we're moving into this decade, an era where mass optimization will not be the key to spacecraft design. We'll move from the current era of exploratory spacecraft to a new era of expeditionary spacecraft and industrial systems. And establish genuine differentiation. Don't try to just be first with a conventional approach or conventional technologies. Find something that is absolutely unique and allows you to grow your market without worrying about competitors coming up behind. Because there are advantages to first mover, there are first mover advantages. There are also second mover advantages as well. So you've got to strike the balance between the two. And also because of the onset of reusable launch, this chasm is closing. The market chasm is closing. The entire tide of the space resources industry is coming into view across the horizon. So things are moving quickly, and a new era is emerging in the space resources business. And I'm not sure you'll be able to see these slides too well, but I'll explain the principle of why the space resources industry is a moving target. On the left, you can see the price for lunar-based for propellant in low lunar orbit sourced from Earth. And to the right, you can see the price point for the same, but with reusable launch vehicles. So the left is expendable launch vehicles, and the right is reusable launch vehicles, where the red curve, the red line is sourced from Earth, and the blue line is sourced from the moon. And you see that the main principle to draw out of this is that if we had expendable launch vehicles only, lunar-based water as a source of propellant wins hands down. If we have reusable launch, the challenge for the resources sector is that the challenge and the opportunity is that terrestrially sourced water remains competitive for a certain amount of time. And if we take a second market area of low Earth orbit for, say, water sourced from Earth or Moon, or propellant, let's say LOX hydrogen propellant sourced from Earth or Moon, on the left-hand chart, you can see that lunar source propellant becomes competitive against Earth source propellant in 2027 with expendable launch vehicles only. However, if we have reusable launch vehicles, that shifts to the right because that terrestrial propellant becomes also much cheaper as well. So all the costs drop, all the price points drop, but the lower cost launch becomes, the more reusable it becomes, the more repeatable and cheaper everything is. The case for lunar source propellant shifts to the right. Now, this is a fundamentally important principle to understand, in that we are chasing a moving target, and we have to actually price our business models with the assumption, or to be sensitive to the assumption, that launch may cost $500 a kilogram to low Earth orbit, or $100 a kilogram to low Earth orbit, or less in this decade and next. And that changes the dynamics. It doesn't pull the rug out from extraterrestrial resource, propellant resource, of course, but it shifts it to the right, especially for low Earth orbit, which is arguably some of the first delivery points. So you just need to be sensitive to that and subsequent types of analysis. And so just to wrap up here, reusable launch changes everything, and you have to adjust your business models accordingly. In order to scale beyond GEO, we really need to stimulate the lunar source markets. That 5 to 10 year gap, that reusable launch may push resources to the right, means that you need to build a business model that gives you at least a decade's resilience outside of purely space resource delivery. And these are some of the principles that we also undertook at Off-World. Just as a final wrap up, our company really lives by some of those principles that I just outlined. We're building machine intelligent collaborative robots for extracting water ice and other resources on the moon, and for constructing and building habitats. But our first business model deployment is for terrestrial mining and construction. And right now we have our first 2 species of robot underground in terrestrial mines for autonomous digging and directed energy beaming for breaking a rock without actually touching it. And that kind of application and that kind of approach is really what you want to try and do as you build your space resources business.
Thank you so much, Jim. Thank you very much for that 5-minute chat. We love hearing your voice. And I can see that things are very exciting on the chat. Michael Mealing is there, and he's talking a lot about, well, he's answering all of the questions as we go along, but he's also pointed out that there's a public Zoom and Clubhouse. If most of you know about Clubhouse, you can download the app. It's an audio online platform for conversation discussion. And he does it every Tuesday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern US time. And he's also given his Twitter handle there as well.